Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Hey folks, just a quick heads up before we get started. Today's episode is going to be audio only. No video this time, but it's a good one. Stick around. Today, the Nobel Peace Prize touches a nerve in Venezuela.
The fact that Maria Corina Machado, an opposition leader, won the Nobel Peace Prize was suddenly a big shock for the government.
President Nicolas Maduro is lashing out and feeling the pressure. What does it mean for his hold on power and the future of Venezuela's democracy? I'm Kevin Hirten, and this is The Take. Before we continue with today's show, remember to leave us a comment and share your thoughts. What do you think of Venezuela's Nobel Prize winner? And what do you make of President Nicolas Maduro's response? And if you're listening on a podcast app, be sure to leave us a review. It really does help the show.
My name is Teresa. I'm a correspondent for Al Jazeera English. I'm currently based in Buenos Aires, covering Latin America and other places around the world.
Teresa, welcome to The Take. Nicolas Maduro, Venezuela's president, is a man with a lot on his plate right now. We're taping this on Wednesday, October 15th, and there was news overnight that the U.S. military killed 6 more people on a boat near the Venezuelan coast.
President Trump says U.S. forces struck another boat in the waters off Venezuela that he claims was a drug vessel. Mr. Trump posted video of the strike on social media saying all 6 people aboard were killed and that no U.S. forces were harmed. It marks the 5th deadly strike in the Caribbean against...
It's the latest in a series of air assaults on people in small boats that the Trump administration says, without providing evidence, are drug smugglers. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy remains deployed in the region. The drumbeat of an actual war with the U.S. has not abated. And into the middle of all of this, the Nobel Committee in Oslo up and awards the Peace Prize to his political opponent. So, start us off. Tell us what happened and how Maduro reacted to that news.
Well, certainly it came as a shock for the government, for the Venezuelans in general. Everyone I spoke to were telling me, they couldn't believe it, that this was a show of massive support for the opposition in Venezuela. But for the Maduro administration, this was seen as a threat. In fact, I spoke to government officials who literally told me Venezuela is under attack because everything that's been adding up to this event. We've been seeing for the past months the deployment of military vessels in the Caribbean. We've been seeing the attacks against alleged boats carrying drugs in the Caribbean. So suddenly, everyone is on alert in Venezuela. They don't know what the next move by the United States is going to be. But the fact that Maria Corina Machado, an opposition figure, an opposition leader, won the Nobel Peace Prize was suddenly, a big shock for the government and again, a big show of support for the opposition in the country.
What did the Nobel Committee say? Why did the Nobel Committee award her with this prize?
Well, she was awarded the prize for the defense of democracy.
She is receiving the Nobel Peace Prize for her tireless work promoting democratic rights for the people of Venezuela and for her struggle to achieve a just and peaceful transition from dictatorship to democracy.
So tell me about her backstory. Where did she come from?
Well, Maria Corina Machado, she studied engineering. She is also an expert on finance. And from a very young age, she was involved in politics in Venezuela. We saw her, for example, challenging Hugo Chavez and telling him about the suffering of many people in Venezuela and accusing him of expropriating properties, among other things. And she was a congresswoman. She was elected to the National Assembly in Venezuela. Then she was expelled from it and accused of being a traitor and receiving support from the United States later on. She managed to win the primaries within the opposition to be the real candidate for the elections, but she was barred from running. So she chose another man to be elected instead, Edmundo González Urrutia. But she managed to unite the opposition, and they went and presented in the elections.
Este es el anhelo que hoy nos une, el compromiso que hoy asumimos, y tengan la seguridad de que vamos a ganar.
The opposition says that they won this election. The Maduro government says they won those elections. But the image of her was that on the streets, defending democracy, saying that there was fraud in the elections, people massively attending her call. And, she managed to bring some hope to many people in Venezuela after a massive crisis in the country, after at least 7 million people left the country because of the crisis. But in spite of this, in the end, what we saw in the elections in 2024 is that she managed to unite the opposition, that she managed to get people on the streets, not only to vote, which was something that many in Venezuela had lost hope of being able to, win an election. And I think the Nobel Peace Prize gives the opposition that, a bit of hope, because it's interesting to know that after the elections, after the protests, after the detentions and everything that happened, it's kind of the opposition was struck in what to do next. Maria Corina Machado is in hiding. Nobody really knows where she is. It's not clear whether she's going to be even able to attend the ceremony in December, because it's not clear whether she'll be able to leave the country at all.
What has Maduro said about Machado specifically?
Basically, he said that she's a witch, that she is an agent from the United States.
90% of the population repudiates the demonic witch.
Supposedly, they are shutting down the embassy in Oslo, which is very significant in a way, because the fact that Norway until now, has always tried to mediate between the opposition and the administration. Until now, they were reluctant to call Nicolas Maduro a dictator, something that we've seen from many governments across the world. And the fact that the Nobel Peace Prize is going to Maria Corina Machado certainly shows that something has changed.
Machado did something else that probably angered Maduro. She praised U.S. President Trump after accepting the award. Why would she do something like that?
Well, there's been a long relationship between Maria Corina Machado and the United States. She's always been very close to the Republican Party in the United States. And it's not just Trump. We've seen that in the past. And she called Trump and dedicated the award to him, probably not to upset him because he was hoping to win the award himself.
Yeah.
But there's been a long list of comments of Machado supporting the U.S. policy on Venezuela, from sanctions to deploying the U.S. military surrounding the Venezuelan coasts, among other things.
Right. She's also promoted this discredited theory that Maduro is in control of the Tren de Aragua gang. It is using it to invade the United States. Is that significant in your opinion?
Well, certainly it is significant, because this is not just, going after drug traffickers. This is implying that Nicolas Maduro is the chief of el Tren de Aragua. So certainly the Trump administration is building a case against Maduro,
yes,
calling the administration, drug traffickers, narco-terrorists. And while calling them narco-terrorists, it changes the rules of engagement, and it allows them to do things, attacking terrorists. And we've seen what the United States does when it attacks terrorists.
Right. Yes, Tren de Aragua has been used to justify all manner of things by the Trump administration. So apart from just being an opposition figure opposing Maduro, what is her positive vision for Venezuela?
Well, there's been lots of discussion that supposedly she has this 100-day plan if Maduro were to be removed from office or resigned or anything like that. What honestly at this point seems highly improbable unless something major happens.
Yeah.
And that major, I mean something coming from the United States. But, Maria Corina Machado speaks about privatizations in the country, probably privatizing PDVSA, which is the country's state-owned company, which is huge in the country and has been used politically for many, many issues. So it would mean opening up Venezuela probably for the United States, privatizing companies, among other things. So that's what we know for now of what would be an economic plan. That's what's been discussed. Of course, these are all talks. And, what would happen in the country where if Maduro leave office, it's open to lots of debate.
We'll have more with Teresa after the break. Teresa, let me just nail down a few more things about Maduro specifically. He's been president since 2013, famously succeeding Hugo Chavez. His elections have always been cloaked in controversy, but 2024 was really the most outrageous. We covered that here on this podcast. And most independent analysis shows that he actually lost that election and then just stayed in power. Does he show signs that he might be losing his grip on power?
Well, yes, and I covered that election thoroughly. We never saw what happened in July 2024 before. Presidents in the region like Gustavo Petro or Lula da Silva in Brazil seriously questioning the elections in Venezuela and demanding that Maduro present the electoral tallies. And that never happened. So this certainly changed the way the region perceived Venezuela, because even though many condemned many of the actions of the Venezuelan government, people were reluctant to call Nicolas Maduro a dictator. And that's something that changed in this part of the region.
He does seem to be acting a bit erratically. He declared Christmas early. What is this Christmas thing all about?
Well, it's not the first time it happens. They have done it before, and it's something, I don't know, it's part of a show that the government does in general to draw attention to other issues that are happening in the country. And when we talk about the way Maduro has reacted with everything that's been going on, and even though Maduro is still in power, we know that, for example, in the past weeks, there's been lots of detentions, of arbitrary detentions of supposed members of the opposition. But at the same time, the government is always trying to negotiate with the US. For example, there was a report by the New York Times saying that the government was negotiating with the Trump administration or willing to allow US companies to exploit Venezuelan oil and gold in the country. So there's lots of attempts by the administration to negotiate with the United States. It seems right now that the US is not open to any negotiation. And this, I believe, is making the Venezuelan government very nervous.
Yeah, that nervousness. Maduro addressed U.S. military escalation on his television show on Monday.
More than
90% of the country rejects the call to invade, rejects the threats from the United States government. More than 90% of the country says that what the United States government is after is our oil, our riches.
Is any idea what the reaction has been inside Venezuela itself? Is there a chance that this or maybe even a further escalation of the conflict could actually help increase Maduro's popularity in Venezuela?
I'm not sure if it would increase Maduro's popularity. People are at this point very disenchanted. Millions of people fleeing the country, a massive economic crisis, a situation that has stabilized a bit in the past years, but life is still very difficult for people in Venezuela. Salaries are very, very low. Leaving the country or migrating continues to be the best option for many people in the country. The attacks on these boats in the Caribbean are very frightening for many people in the country.
Yeah.
We've been talking and in touch with fishermen who live on the coast, and some of them cross to islands, to Aruba or to Curacao to sell some of their fruit. They're afraid to go out and sell that fruit because, they're afraid of being struck by a drone. We don't know the people that have died. We've seen Gustavo Petro saying that maybe some of those who were on those ships were Colombian. We know that some of the men killed on the first boat that was struck were from a little place in Sucre. And we heard their relatives speaking about how they were doing that job for very little money. So are they going after the people that are transporting the drugs? But what's happening to the leaders? That's a big question also in Latin America when we question US policy when fighting drugs.
Yeah.
Are they really going after major drug traffickers, or they're just attacking people that are moving drugs for a living? I think people in the country are tired of the struggles they have to face every day. Many of the people I have spoken to are not sure whether it's going to be Maria Corina Machado or an attack by the United States who are going to improve their way of life, because there's also lots of questioning that is going to happen. But at the same time, people are very, very tired of the current administrations and the economic struggles they have to go through. So it's a difficult situation for people in the country.
Yeah. So the Nobel Peace Prize doesn't just laud past achievements. It's often viewed as a way to influence future outcomes, which may explain some of Maduro's erratic behavior over the past few days. So, for example, in 1994, the committee gave PLO leader Yasser Arafat, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, and Israeli Foreign Minister Shimon Peres the award at the same time. And it was seen as a way to possibly encourage an Israeli-Palestinian peace process. U.S. President Obama, he got the award just 9 months into his term. So if you accept that frame, what do you think Machado's win could signal for the future?
It's giving Machado support for her to continue in this fight for democracy in Venezuela. I think that's the key element here, is not pacifying Venezuela, because that would mean bringing in a government and forcing a negotiation. We're not seeing any type of a call for a negotiation. We're seeing calls for regime change, in fact, in Venezuela. I think that's why so many people question this Nobel Peace Prize in Latin America. But I think that it's mostly enforcing political change in Venezuela. It's enforcing a woman that in the past year has become the hope that many Venezuelans have, that there's going to be some type of change in their country, that they're not going to be forced to leave the country. I do not believe at this point that the opposition will be able to force Nicolas Maduro out of office. And clearly, with what has happened in the elections last year, Nicolas Maduro, if he loses, it's very unlikely that his administration would recognize a defeat. And we've seen, what happens in many countries after, an authoritarian government falls or a dictatorship falls. I covered the war in Iraq, and many people were hoping for Saddam Hussein to go. And 2 months later, there was lots of anger against the United States for what was happening in the country and the civil war and everything that came after.
It is funny that for all of Donald Trump's ire towards the Nobel Committee, awarding the award as they did is a bit of a bank shot endorsement of Trumpism. I mean, she's a staunch Trump ally. Who's left in Maduro's corner internationally?
Well, for what we know officially right now is that Nicolas Maduro continues to have the support of China. He continues to have the support of Russia. He continues to have the support of Iran. But of course, we don't know how long that support will last if there's negotiations about oil reserves of Venezuela's gold, and how could all of that be divided among different superpowers.
Wow. So Venezuela has this strong man in power who fears an attack from President Trump. And then they have an opposition leader who is backed by President Trump. So this is a very perilous place to be. I wonder what this dynamic, this untenable dynamic, means for the nation's democracy. What does it mean for the people stuck in the middle?
There's lots of questioning about the state of Venezuela's democracy. And I think that's something that needs to be stressed. The buildup in the Caribbean, the attacks on boats allegedly carrying drugs in the Caribbean, the Nobel Peace Prize of a crucial Trump ally, And I think the important change in the narrative from the United States, the United States is not talking about a dictator, it's talking about a narco-terrorist. And this changes completely the situation on the ground, because this changes the rules of engagement of the United States. Most of the analysts I have spoken to say, that drug traffickers, you deal with drug traffickers with law enforcement. But how do you deal with terrorists, And that is why, there's so much uncertainty about what will happen. Is the United States going to continue attacking boats allegedly carrying drugs? Or is it going to be further and they're going to attack these drug traffickers on Venezuelan soil? And I think that's what changes everything.
Teresa, thank you so much for coming on The Take and helping us get our head around this very complicated issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Haleema Shah, Tamara Khandaker, Noor Wazwaz, and Marcos Bartolomé, with Amy Walters, Fatima Shafiq, Farhan Rafid, and me, Kevin Hirten. It was edited by Kylene Kiang. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Our video editors are Hisham Abu Salah and Mohannad al-Melhem. Alexandra Locke is The Take's executive producer. Ney Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.